I sort of can't believe we haven't done this show before, because I've actually spent probably a disproportionate amount of my life thinking about eggs, to say nothing of cooking and eating them and being personally introduced to certain chickens. And I don't know. I mean, eggs are like really important and really interesting to me, and we've never done an entire show about them. I think the problem is that nobody had ever written what we call in the shop here a Mark Kurlansky book about eggs. Now, it turns out a person named Lizzie Stark wrote the Mark Kurlansky book about eggs, but it's the kind of book that pulls together a lot of different aspects: biology, science, aesthetics, art, culture, human relations. It's all there. And of course, it's all there in the egg, too. That's the whole idea. All right, so we'll be talking about eggs in lots of different styles and flavorings right after whatever comes next, right after I stop talking.
There's a funny question that comes up now and then. What came first, the egg or the hen? I went into the hen house, and what do you suppose? Not even the rooster knows. The rooster says that gets me, but I'll find out, my friend. What came first, the egg or the hen? He called the hens together.
All right, so we are actually not going to ponder that question here today, although we could very quickly answer it. And the reason is because our primary guest here on the show, which is a show about eggs, by the way, if I haven't already made that clear, has been asked that question too many times. Lizzie Stark is a play expert and the author of 2 nonfiction books, including Pandora's DNA and Leaving Mundania, I think. And then her new book. Her new book is Egg, A Dozen Overtures. You see what she did there. And she's with us right now. Before I bring her in, I will just quickly say, I'll say it to you, Lizzie. So in the Broadway play, The Silver Whistle, we encounter a tramp named Emmett. And he's seen, I think, sitting on a wall, pondering an egg. And he says, "An egg has no sides. I find that reassuring. Every part of an egg is curved. It's nice to know that there's something you can depend on." I will now say that I'll now identify myself as a Nepo baby. My father, Bob McEnroe, wrote that line. So our family, we've been thinking about eggs a lot for a long time. Very excited about this book. So Lizzie Stark, this book is about so many different things. Really, it's about the tech and architecture of an egg. It's about the eggs that we eat, that we'll be talking about a lot in the second segment. But it's also, you sort of try to get into the soul of an egg, right?
Yeah, that's right, Colin. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited. I'm egg-cited to talk about what's under the shell and around the shell today. Yeah, in my book, Egg, A Dozen Overtures, I try to look at an egg from 12 different angles. So I look at it as an object of play, as a myth and story, its role in space exploration, in vaccines, and so much more.
Yes, and we will talk about the space exploration angle towards the end of this segment because I'm excited about it. I'm excited about anything that isn't an astronaut and goes into space. But we'll begin just sort of by the way we eggs are so much a part of our culture, mostly the eating of them, but also, of course, the whole reproduction element itself. I'm going to play a little scene for you from one of my favorite movies. It's Frankie and Johnny. You're going to hear Al Pacino as a short order cook trying to impress an unimpressed waitress named Frankie. Michelle Pfeiffer, A1 cat.
I need scrambled with bacon, 2 easy overs with sausage, and a Belgian waffle.
I'm Johnny.
Hi.
Who are you?
Frankie. These eggs don't look runny. Mr. DeLeon likes them runny.
They look runny to me. They're pretty runny.
It's a regular.
Who can argue with that? And who can argue with you? Thy head is full of quarrel, like an egg is full of meat. William Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet. I'm reading it now. Act 3, Scene 1. I can't find it now. Okay. Raw eggs coming up.
Not raw. Runny.
So, Lizzie, there's a lot contained in there, including a Shakespeare quote. But there's also that kind of idea. There's a way in which, the exterior of an egg really does suggest perfection. And the inside of an egg, even though you go into quite a bit of detail about the really kind of perfect architecture, the tech, as you call it, of an egg. But I think to our minds, there's chaos, right? There's just stuff that's going to come gushing out all over the place. A runny egg makes people nervous.
Yes, runny egg can make people nervous. I mean, one thing I discovered writing this book is that everybody has their own very exact way of how the perfect egg. And for me, the perfect egg is a little bit runny. But going back to that theme of chaos, I think there is something about eggs that just invites the idea of chaos. And of course, you can see this in the egg myths from around the world, where the egg represents a kind of generative chaos that then the world is created out of. But you can also see it in, say, a Halloween egging incident, right? There's something about eggs that one of the affordances of eggs is that they want to be broken, or that they could be broken and create a delightfully chaotic mess.
Right. And we are actually in the final segment. Lizzie will have gone on to greater things by that time, but we are actually going to have a lengthy conversation with the philosopher John Portman about that idea of throwing eggs on Halloween and other less sublime occasions. I want to talk a little bit. We're going to talk a lot about eating the interior of an egg, but there's stuff about the shell in your book that I just found mind-blowing. We don't have a lot of time. I don't think we should walk you through the entire egg as tech thing that you do in the book. People should buy the book and read it for that. But I thought the most mind-blowing thing that I encountered was this idea that the same chicken could lay one egg in, let's say, Baton Rouge and another egg in Denver, and the shells would be significantly different in composition. Explain why that is.
Yes. So eggshells contain pores that allow gas exchange to happen. So when the chick is developing microbial water, the water all living things give off can evaporate and oxygen can come in. And a hen can somehow detect the oxygen concentration in the air. So there are more pores on the blunt side of the egg than there are on the pointy side, because the blunt side is where the chick's head develops. And if you take a chicken from Baton Rouge and move it to Colorado on top of a mountain in the thinner air, that chicken's going to lay an egg with more pores for gas exchange to happen to compensate for the lower concentration of oxygen in the air.
But that's like a chicken has some kind of mysterious internal barometer or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think we quite understand how that works. Chickens can also delay laying eggs, or birds can delay laying eggs depending on what the weather is like, so that they can time their reproductive cycle optimally for the season. There are a lot of mysterious things about egg laying that we just haven't quite figured out yet, and that's one of them.
And maybe we're not meant to know. Chickens have to have some secrets. So we should also, one of the other things that I loved was this whole thing about the role that ostrich eggs played in Stone Age development, that actually sort of made it possible for Stone Age people to roam out into the desert. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes. So going back about 60,000 years, archaeologists have found ostrich eggshell fragments in the desert. And ostriches are real scary birds. They deliver kicks that could kill a lion. But if you get an ostrich egg away from the communal nest, it can hold about 1 liter of water. And you can cut out a little hole in the top of the egg and stop it up with grass or beeswax. And it functions as a perfect water canteen. Holds a goodly portion of water, 1 liter, and the pores in the eggshell help keep the water a bit cool. And so these eggshell canteens enabled the desert exploration by Stone Age peoples. And much like we might slap a bumper sticker on our car or on our water bottle, the Stone Age people decorated their ostrich eggshell canteens, and archaeologists have found fragments of these egg decorations. And it's archaeologists say it's some of the oldest evidence for abstract thought in humans, which kind of blew my mind. And then the eggshells are quite thick and robust, and they were ground down into these tiny beads. And so people would wear bracelets made of ostrich eggshell beads. And the curious thing is that not all of the beads were from the same eggshell. There's evidence that people exchanged these beads across networks spanning hundreds of miles, which was no small thing in the Stone Age. So eggs truly are at the beginning of it all.
Right. And so there's a way in which I think we have a fascination with eggs that's probably also a kind of adaptive in an evolutionary way. I'm always telling people anyway that an egg kind of contains everything that it's going to take to make a chicken or a robin or an ostrich or whatever it's going to turn into. That's the plan. That's the egg's plan. The egg's plan is not to be in an omelet. The egg's plan is, nope, let's make another one of us. And maybe for that reason, the sort of the nutritional completeness of an egg, people get pretty fired up if they can't have them. So you actually document kind of what are thought of as the egg wars of the Farallon Islands. I think that's worth spending a couple of minutes talking about.
Sure. Yes. So in Gold Rush era San Francisco, there were shortages of a lot of things. The population of San Francisco exploded, and city infrastructure and the infrastructure of food, of farming couldn't keep up. And so people were starved for eggs. They were incredibly expensive. In the city of San Francisco, a fresh chicken egg might fetch $1 per egg. And that's in 1848 money. Well, out in the gold fields, prices were up to $3 per egg. So you could make a lot of money from eggs.
Right. Well, I just want to pause you and say, so we're talking $400 to $1,200 per dozen in 2023 money terms, probably somewhere in there.
Exactly. Yes, somewhere in there. So, I mean, hugely expensive. And so there was an enterprising pharmacist who figured out that there are these really inhospitable islands off the coast of San Francisco. They're just like jagged rocks sticking up from these shark-infested waters. And they were famous for causing a bunch of shipwrecks. Anyway, on these islands, there were hundreds of thousands of seabirds. And so Doc Robinson and his brother-in-law took a boat over. They gathered the eggs of the common murre, which is a seabird that is black and white, and it lays eggs bigger than a chicken egg. And they lost half of their cargo on the sea on the way back, but they still managed to sell it for what would amount to about $100,000 today. And the trip was so terrifying for them that they vowed never to return. But word got out, and within a few days, there were armed gangs setting up egg gathering operations on the island. And decades of armed struggle between the rival gangs, and later between the gangs and the men who worked on the lighthouse, which was eventually built on the Farallon Islands, ensued. And so you get all of these amazing news articles, like about the guys who hid in Great Muir Cave during a shootout, where the ammonia fumes from the guano like killed a couple people. Lighthouse keepers being hijacked and kidnapped by gangs of eggers who were trying to gain access to the island. Some of the lighthouse keepers were on the taking bribes from various egg companies to allow them to lease the egg rights.
My favorite thing, this is sort of disturbing. All of this is disturbing, actually. So there was this idea that the eggs from this seabird, and I think they're like 2.5 times the size of a chicken egg, but if you didn't get a completely fresh one, you would wind up with a fishy taste in your mouth, I guess because those birds eat fish, that wouldn't go away for months or something. So there was this mania, not just for the eggs, but for getting fresh ones. And didn't two guys go and smash all of the eggs that were there so that they would, and then sleep on the island so that they would know that the next day they were finding only fresh eggs? It was something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. The egg guys were out there with their workers, and they had divided the island during egging season into different parts. And so they'd go to the place they'd be harvesting tomorrow, and they smashed all of the eggs. And common mures, they only lay one clutch of eggs per year, and this had predictably devastating effects on the local bird population. But, the city of San Francisco got its eggs, which were perfectly acceptable in baked goods.
So I listened to some of the show that you did on KQED where you took calls, and it became clear nobody's going to stump Lizzie Stark about eggs. There's just nobody can throw anything at you that you can't catch. Although I'm going to tell you one thing that I bet you don't know.
Okay.
And partly because you think the topic itself is boring. And that is in the movie Risky Business, the Tom Cruise movie Risky Business, the end of the movie, there's the denouement involves this Fabergé egg that his mother prizes so much. And he's about to go off to college. They've been away. You may recall he's deflowered by a sex worker while that happens. Lots of other things happens. And when she returns, they've restored the house to its former order after running a brothel out of the house and stuff like that. And his parents look around and they are obviously reassured. And then she picks up the Fabergé egg and she says, there's a crack. There's a little crack inside this egg that wasn't there before. And I didn't notice it at the time, but it's really kind of I think it's sort of a comment on the fact that her son is about to go away to college. She doesn't know that he's just lost his virginity too, but there's sort of a sense of that kind of loss of innocence. That's not what's interesting. What's interesting is there are a lot of people who've tried to find that particular Fabergé egg, and there are Reddit discussions. Of course, there are Reddit discussions about what egg that actually is and how much it costs and everything, which I found kind of fabulous. But I also know you don't like Fabergé eggs very much, nor do I.
Yeah, that's right. Fabergé eggs, they're just a fancy rich guy's way of doing the local folk art of pisanki, which was like a Ukrainian method for dyeing Easter eggs, writing on Easter eggs with all of this intricate symbolism. And yeah, I just find that more interesting. There's all of these magical angles to it. People would put the pisanki out to keep evil spirits away. They'd bury these eggs in the fields to ensure a good harvest. The cattle got their own eggs to help ensure a good year. So yeah, there's a lot of fascinating. But I've never seen Risky Business.
All right. So. Well, when you see it, you realize that his parents, unlike Stone Age people in Australia, are not capable of abstract thinking. So that's why they're so excited about their Fabergé egg. All right, so we have a little bit of time left in this segment. I do want to talk about eggs in space. One thing you probably were not told by producer Betsy Kaplan is that we have the only people who are not allowed on the show are astronauts. So I'm always fascinated when anything else goes into space. So explain what's going on with that, because I was completely unaware of this whole line of discussion.
Sure. So we've been sending eggs up into space for, ever since the earliest balloon experiments. And we sent them up to space as proxy for the human body. People didn't know whether cosmic rays would kill us or not. So they sent up the next best thing, an egg, figuring that if it killed the egg, it would probably kill people too. But cosmic rays did not kill the egg. And so we went on to send people up into space. And since then, Chickens in Space has been an effort of food, right? Astronauts need to eat in space. So we've had freeze-dried eggs going into space forever and ever. And there's a long astronaut tradition of eating something that doesn't force you to use the bathroom for quite a while. And so there's like a launch day tradition of eating steak and eggs. And then sending actual shelled eggs into space has been kind of another experiment in what happens to the body in space, what happens perhaps to the female body in space. So these two guys, John Vellinger and Mark Deuser, John Vellinger was a really enterprising junior high school, and college student. He won this countrywide NASA science competition to send eggs in an incubator up into space, because he had noticed that at home his hens rotated their eggs once a day to prevent gravity from working on the yolks. So he thought, I wonder what happens to eggs when gravity is not working on the yolks. So they sent eggs up into space, embryos that were 2 days old, as well as embryos that were 9 days old. and brought them back down to Earth. And what they found was that none of the 2-day-old embryos had survived, that the effect of gravity on a developing embryo is important. But the 9-day embryos, which were a bit longer in their development before they were sent up into space, many of them survived. And many of them were hatched. And that is how the Louisville Museum got Kentucky, the first space chicken. I guess I forgot to mention that John Vellinger, when he won this NASA science competition, had gotten hooked up with a corporate sponsor, and the natural corporate sponsor was Kentucky Fried Chicken. So I think the eggs in space experiments bode poorly both for space sex and space birth, was kind of my reading of it. But I do hope that I'm wrong about that, and that we can look forward to many years of both having babies in space and eating eggs in space.
All right. Well, speak for yourself. But had we but World in Time, I would tell you about the Chicken of Tomorrow contest, which was held in 1946 and 1947. Well, you talk like you already know about that. I'm given the noise that you just made.
Yeah, I got a lot of relatives in Fayetteville, Arkansas, who were professors of like apple growing at the time that that competition was run.
The winner actually is not too far from where I'm sitting right now, Arbor Acres. Anyway, we can't talk about that because we have to take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk with Lizzie and our good friend Chris Prosperi about eating and therefore cooking eggs.
Nighthawks at the diner, Emma's 49er. There's a rendezvous of strangers around a cafe in the night. All the gypsy hacks and the insomniacs, now the paper's been read. Now the waitress said, eggs and sausage and a side of toast, a coffee and a roll, hash browns over easy.
Oh, I frequently think every now and then of the glorious fruit of the noble hen. Eggs! Eggs! E-double-G-S eggs. My knowledge of eggs is tremendously wide. I've eaten them boiled, I've eaten them fried, poached and shirred and deviled and scrambled, omelette, schmommelets, coddled and frambled.
We play more Alan Sherman songs than any radio show in America. I guarantee you that. I'm not sure that's an article of pride, but it's true. So Lizzie Stark is with us. She's written an amazing book called Eggs, A Dozen Overtures. Joining her and me now is my old friend Chris Prosperi, the chef and co-owner of Metro Peace Restaurant, and the chief also in Simsbury, and a former recipe columnist for the Hartford Courant. Lots of other things besides. And so I think we should just begin by saying that cooking eggs is really complicated because of something Lizzie and I kind of referenced at the beginning. One person's egg treasure is another person's egg poison. People are very particular about how they like it. Our senior producer, Lily Tyson, of course, wrote the hit YA novel 5 Ways I Won't Eat Eggs, which is being made into a motion picture starring, I think, the girl from The Power. But we're going to play another little movie clip for you. This one I think you will recognize from Runaway Bride. So let's hear Richard Gere talking to Julia Roberts. This is B1 Cat.
You were so lost you didn't even know what kind of eggs you like. Yes. Yes. Yes, that's right. With the priest, you wanted scrambled. With the deadhead, it was fried. With the other guy, the bug guy, it was poached. Now it's like, egg whites only. Thank you very much.
That is called changing your mind.
No, that's called not having a mind of your own. Maggie, what are you doing?
So, Lizzie, your book is very much about the culture of cooking eggs. There's some very touching stuff about you and your father trying to perfect or at least master about 20 different egg recipes. There's that whole idea of, particularly with an egg, there's something like, this is very simple, but can I do it?
Yeah, exactly. An egg is extremely sensitive. And so you can get very different results by changing certain variables, like very minutely. You know, a millimeter on that stove dial might result in to my mind, very inedible round egg. And doing it too slow might result in a white that's so tender you're struggling to get the fried egg off of the pan. And that's the game of eggs. Almost any egg is edible. Almost any egg is going to meet somebody's palate requirements. But to get an egg truly perfect for yourself and to be able to do that reliably, it's a difficult mountain to climb, and therefore it's interesting to climb, in my opinion.
All right. So Chris, and I should say, just cards on the table, Chris and I in the past have been known to, if one of us is in the presence of duck eggs, we often would buy duck eggs for the other person too. And I had a smoothie this morning, which means I could make eggs for dinner. And that's, I know one of your things, Chris, is that eggs are not just for breakfast.
Yeah, eggs are for all times. And back to what Lizzie was saying, the egg omelet and the scrambled egg is probably one of the easiest yet hardest things to cook. I think anyway. I've been doing it now for 40 years, since I was a little boy cooking eggs at home with my mom. And I think I came close to the perfect omelet a few times, but I've never quite got it because it's that moment in time. And like Lizzie said, the temperature has to be right. How cold were the eggs when they went in the pan? How warm were the eggs? There's so many variables going, and they're so delicate to cook that it is, I think, a lifetime pursuit to cook the perfect egg.
Yeah, I actually make very good, if I may say so, scrambled eggs. I think that most of the women I have spent time with in my life don't miss a lot of things about me, but I think occasionally they think about me and they think, you really did make good scrambled eggs, and that's a thing. So I guess I would ask both of you if you wanted to mention like a little slightly more obscure egg. Does either one of you know about ova in purgatorio?
No.
Oh, I'll tell you about that later. I want to hear your ones first.
A dish?
Yeah, I've got the trump card, it turns out. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Lizzie.
Is that there's a dish called huevos divorciados, like divorced eggs, which is it's a Latin American dish. It's 2 eggs, and one's with a red sauce and one's with a green sauce. But I feel like it's something with eggs and tomatoes.
Yeah. So you have that.
Am I close?
Yeah, you are absolutely 100% close. And indeed, so yeah, after your Mexican divorce, you have the huevos divorcia.
Yes.
That is amazing.
The weirdest eggs I've had, I cooked out of a medieval textbook. And so one of them was a fried deviled egg that had weird sweet spices in it, like raisins and cinnamon and saffron. Ooh. And it just tasted wrong to me because it was like fruitcake flavors, but in a deviled egg. And then the other weird thing I cooked out of the same cookbook was egg yolks poached in rose syrup. And you just take an egg yolk and you drop it into this sugar syrup that you've put rose water in. And it comes out and you rest it in some sugar. And it's kind of a little bit tacky, a little bit toffee-y in its texture. And, it was fine, but I'm not going to make that for a dinner party.
It sounds disgusting, actually. I don't even like I know you and your father made tamagoyaki. I don't even like that because the mirin makes it sweet, and I don't like that. But anyway, Chris, what about you? I mean, are there particular egg dishes that you either favor or marvel at in the other kind of way?
And this one goes to what you guys were saying about the eggshell being porous. So back when we were serving truffles quite frequently, and those are the mushrooms that grow underground that have that pungent aroma. If you take your truffles as you're storing them and you store them with a few eggs in a container, or like a glass jar or a plastic container, the truffle aroma and flavor will seep into the egg. And that is probably one of the most amazing egg dishes I've ever had. And then you just very softly scramble those eggs with just some fresh chives. And that probably to date is one of the top 4 dishes I've had in my life.
Wow. Although, let me bounce this off the two of you. This could be my Hibernian soul talking. I also feel like among the perfect combinations in the world, among the 5 perfect combinations of food in the world, and I don't even know what the other 4 are, eggs and potatoes. There's some way in which, like any kind of...
Oh my gosh,
okay,
love them.
Go ahead. You have the floor, Lizzie.
Oh, okay. I mean, my favorite way to have eggs and potatoes is in a Spanish tortilla. Yeah. You slice a bunch of potatoes thinly and you fry them gently in olive oil, and then you drain them, and then you put in some beaten eggs and bake it and flip it. And it's good warm, it's good cold, it's good hot. And most of all, it's a great vehicle for garlic mayo. Aioli. Yeah.
Yes.
That's how I look. How do you like yours, Chris?
Yeah, no, very similar. Actually, a Spanish friend of mine just gave me a recipe for something very similar, and it sounded very strange to me, so I had to immediately try it. It's that same Spanish tortilla that you're talking about, except he whipped in a drained can of tuna.
Oh, I've made that once.
Have you? Right? And it was. Yeah. It was so good. I made it in the kitchen here at work, and I was going to let it cool down a little bit. And by the time I got back to it, quarters of it was already eaten by the kitchen staff. And again, just a strange combination because tuna fish, eggs, and potatoes maybe to me didn't sound good in my head, but man, when we came out of the pan, it was good.
Yeah. It's sort of three of the ingredients in a salad niçoise, like the tuna, the egg, and the potato.
Yep.
That's my other favorite egg and potato experience.
Yeah, I tonight what I'm going to make actually is something called I think it's called shakshuka. It's a North African dish. Yeah, you know it. Explain what it is, Chris, so I don't have to.
Yeah, that's a great one, and we make that often for breakfast. And that is just a African spiced tomato sauce. So it has a lot of like cumin and coriander and spices like that in the tomato sauce. And you basically softly poach the egg inside that tomato sauce. What I usually do is I get the tomato sauce in a shallow pan, and then once it simmers down and thickens a little bit, I make little holes in the tomato sauce, and then I crack the eggs into those holes, put a lid on the pan, and let it softly cook like that. And I'm telling you, unbelievable flavor.
Yeah, Ottolenghi has a good recipe in his Plenty book. And yeah, so it's a North African dish initially, but I think everybody, and I think, Lizzie, uova in purgatorio, eggs in purgatorio, that's basically the Italian version of that, right?
Yeah. And it's great. That kind of thing's great for a crowd at brunch because you can make the tomato sauce ahead of time and then just warm it back up and slip the eggs in. And it seems like you've been cooking all morning.
So, Lizzie, I know you have a question to ask Chris about brunch in restaurants and what it's like to work that shift. Go ahead.
So, Chris, I heard a rumor that the brunch shift is the worst shift to have.
No question.
At a restaurant. And why is that?
And we, to the point where it was one of our main reasons to not open on Sunday, just so we would not have to deal with brunch on Sunday morning. It is mostly because, and I know this is going to sound a little crazy, maybe something to do with the eggs a little bit. Most of line cooks, the people cooking brunch, are very young, right? Say 20-ish. And on Saturday night when they're working, as soon as they get out of work, unlike me, I go home and go to bed, they go out and party and have fun. On a Saturday night. Bars in Connecticut are open till 2 a.m. on Saturday. So they're out till 2, 3 a.m. And then the brunch shift starts. It's the earliest shift of a restaurant. And all of a sudden you have to be back at work and you're cooking eggs. So I guess the hangover and the egg don't really go together.
Yeah. Was that what you thought, Lizzie, or did you have a different theory?
No, that's not what I thought. But it makes a lot of sense.
Oh.
It makes a lot of sense.
Raw eggs and after a night of drinking is not a good combination.
I think that's like a traditional hangover cure, though. Of like a raw egg yolk, a prairie oyster. There you go.
Right. I think you don't do that anymore, too. I used to, when I was a teenager, I'd go to Friendly's, which is a fast casual place before that term existed, and I'd ask for a raw egg in my milkshake. And even then there were sort of uncomfortable stares. But I think you don't do it anymore because of, I don't know, fears about salmonella or something.
Yeah, and I think, is that why the soft-boiled egg went away? I don't know about you guys, but we had our own little fancy cup to put as children, to put our, I think it even had our names written on them, scribed on them. And, I had mine that it's good. And my mom would soft boil the eggs for breakfast. And then we'd each go to the cupboard and grab our own egg cup. And then you'd crack the top of the egg off and put your salt and pepper in there. Is that even done anymore?
You can't even mention soft boiled eggs in front of Lizzie Stark right now because I only have a minute worth of time left here. And this is a really big conversation for Lizzie.
They still have them in Great Britain where toast and soldiers and dippy eggs is honored kid breakfast.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I there's a lot of ceremony involved, like tapping the side of it, and you got the cup. And Lizzie, I think you grew up with some kind of special spoon that you used.
Oh yeah, tiny little golden spoon, and you slurp it out. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It might be too much.
Totally.
Of course, I've never made toad in the hole either. I know that's like a big thing.
Another great one.
Yeah.
Another great one. Yeah.
All right, we're going to have to pause here. It's great to hear the voice of Chris Prosperi, my very good friend, here, and it's been so much fun to visit with Lizzie Stark. We are just scratching the surface, if you can say that about an egg, of her incredible book, Egg, A Dozen Overtures by Lizzie Stark. Get it. There's so much in it. And thanks for listening to this part. Yes. And we are now going to have a conversation about something that Lizzie mentioned when we come back for the break, something that Lizzie mentioned, which is that, yes, another thing that happens with eggs sometimes is that they are tossed. They are thrown. They are thrown at people with the idea of smacking them and dripping down them. And why would that be? Why would they have picked that?
Follow The Colin McEnroe Show on Facebook or Twitter at Colin McShow. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to or following our podcast on any podcast app. It's free. You don't have to wait an hour after eating before you go swimming. That's just something our mothers believed. Back to the show.
So time to say some thank yous. I'm not even completely sure I know everybody that I should thank. I know I should thank Dylan Reyes and Kat Pastor, both technical producers on this show. Betsy Kaplan, the legend, senior producer emeritus of the Colin McEnroe Show, came back to produce this show about eggs. And our current producer, Lily Tyson, senior producer Lily Tyson, also did some very important things with this. I don't even know what they are. It's just kind of priced in to my life that she did. All right, so we're bringing back to the show somebody we've enjoyed very much as a guest in the past, John Portman, who I believe was on our Schadenfreude show, author of When Bad Things Happen to Other People. He taught moral philosophy and ethics at the University of Virginia for several decades, and he's with us now to talk about eggs. So actually, John, let me see if I can set this up in a way that will intrigue you, possibly. So I was working on a profile, this is decades ago, about a guy named George Michael Ivanka, who was kind of a leader in the John F. Kennedy kind of conspiracy assassination movement, and really sort of believed that this foundational, horrible thing had happened in a way that had never been satisfactorily explained. But he was mainly a professor of poetry and literature. So I decided I would go watch him teach a poetry class. And he just gave this amazing lecture. But he talked about how every culture, every civilization has this foundational myth in which paradise is lost, that perfection exists and something goes wrong. And he said, something goes wrong. The egg is cracked. And we spend the rest of existence using poetry and song and prose and dance to try to heal that crack. And I thought, John, that's probably a pretty good place for us to start right now. That idea of the perfection of the egg. The egg is a symbol, an exterior symbol of perfection. I mean, there's something amazing about the shape of it, small enough to come out of a hole in an animal, big enough to hold an embryo. An egg is an amazing thing, but then there's all this messy stuff inside, right?
Yes, and the egg is also, we know, the source of life. I mean, if it's fertilized and conditions are right. So the egg is pregnant, if you will, with all sorts of philosophical significance.
Right. There's probably a reason why Humpty Dumpty is an egg, right? It doesn't say that in the verse, but he is invariably depicted as an egg. Some people say it's because of Lewis Carroll. But there's that idea, right, that it's a thing that if you crack, there's no way that you can reassemble this thing. The messiness is going to come out.
Right. And this professor's particular theory, if I may, dovetails with a theory propounded by William James, who at Harvard invented the field of psychology of religion about 125 years ago. And your professor leans into the importance of poetry and narrative in constructing a sense of well-being, safety, security, human security in the world. And that's just what William James did as well. So in a slightly different way. William James said, religious people, scholars, think that religion is all about texts. The Quran in Islam, the Torah in Judaism, the Bible in Christianity. And William James argued that, in fact, these texts are important to maybe 2% of practicing religious people in the West. That what religions really do is help people manage their emotions, help them feel secure, help them feel grounded, help them feel hopeful about the future.
Right. So, the outside of an egg, an intact egg is maybe kind of suggestive of something maybe divine or divine purpose. But let's go back to that inside. The inside is messy, and it's connected to a whole bunch of things that we are considerably less comfortable with and regard as considerably less pristine. It's implicitly menstrual and amniotic, and it's just all of the stuff that is the stuff of life, but not in a way that we're super at ease with.
Yes, I think that's right. Think of a well-scrubbed, well-dressed person. Inside her or his body is a lot of messiness, a lot of blood, organs. Think about public reactions sometimes to women who nurse in public. There's this view that fluids are meant to stay inside in their place. And when they come out, they're very messy and they frequently frighten people or anger them. So yes, I think you're onto something. The messiness, I think, is absolutely key to how we're going to interpret egging, what it means and why it makes people very uneasy, but frequently not too uneasy. I mean, as opposed to, I don't know, a paintball or a spitball or a snowball or rotten vegetables or a pie in the face. The egg is perfect in a couple of different ways because it's usually not too severe, but of course we know that it can, if it, say, for example, hits you in the eye, it can be severe.
Yes, I may have buried the lead. John is here mainly to talk about egging and why we would use that particular thing. I think this is a Betsy Kaplan inspiration. And yes, I mean, probably the closest thing to it. So close to it, John, that it has given its name, or its name has been used for the most pervasive mode of reviewing culture. Rotten Tomatoes is where you go to find out whether the movie's good or not, because Rotten Tomatoes are what you throw. But meanwhile, the egg is interesting too. When you throw an egg at somebody or even at a building or a statue or something, because it's aerodynamic when it's intact, right? There's a way in which air will pour over it in a satisfying way, making it a more effective missile. But then it has this payload. The payload, this cracked egg, could be gushing out just about anything, as we keep saying. Yeah, amniotic menstrual, but it also could be sort of gastric fluids too. It's just all of the things about life that we're so eager to avoid when we're creating a comfortable reality.
Exactly. And it's that messiness, it's that fear that it might happen to us that makes people very, very uneasy. If you see it happen to, say, for example, Arnold Schwarzenegger or a controversial politician, you may feel relief, but you may feel relief that it hasn't happened to you, but also a little joy that someone who needs to be taken down a peg or taught a lesson has done so in a relatively painless way. Again, if it hits you in the eye, it's very bad. If it's a rotten egg, it'll stink. But normally the egg will wash off pretty quickly. It's not red like the rotten tomato. Usually it is just a little messy, but not too messy. And that's why some people will allow themselves to laugh and jeer. It's sort of like seeing someone slip on a banana peel. You're aware that there's a possibility for injury, but the possibility is pretty slight.
Yeah, we need to do a whole show about bananas probably now that you mentioned that. But so one of the things that's influencing your thinking about this is a book by Mary Douglas called Purity and Danger, right? This is all about that wall that is supposedly, putatively impervious between what and what, John?
Well, we have a saying, as you know, in the English language, cleanliness is next to godliness. And what Mary Douglas argued was that the point of religions is to tell us where crucial boundaries lie with, for example, food and food preparation, with, for example, bodily fluids, menstrual blood, semen, what have you, even spit. the crucial role that religions serve is to enforce this wall between the sacred and the profane, the good, the pure, and the bad. That's why people find, she argued, religions very useful, because they need a way to justify their sort of gut instincts that when, for example, someone puts their bodily fluids where they shouldn't go, or when a person vomits on him or herself or becomes incontinent suddenly, that the revulsion that people feel has a kind of justification, and that this justification comes from very old religious ideals.
So, and in a way, it's the existence of that kind of dichotomy, and it's the creation of that pseudo-pristine world that's clean and supposedly pure that creates the temptation and the dramatic effect of something like throwing an egg, right? There's no point in throwing an egg at Sir Toby Belch or at Iggy Pop, or I mean, they're already they're in the mess with you.
Exactly.
You need to throw the egg at the guy in the white tuxedo jacket or the person in austere religious robes, right? That's what makes the statement.
Exactly. So, I mean, if you went to a wrestling match, you wouldn't throw an egg there probably, because these guys are already sweaty and dirty anyway. So yes, Rihanna, any woman in a beautiful evening gown, or a man in a tux, maybe white tie, they present on TV for the audience as pure, as done. The hair, the skin on the face, the clothes, everything is good, pure, as it should be. And then the egg lands somewhere and messes everything up. And that can be deeply unsettling. It can be very frightening. Everyone waits to see how will, for example, Arnold Schwarzenegger or the controversial politician respond. How will other people now treat this person now that they have been, if you will, sullied? I mean, in my view, we could argue this. There are worse things you could throw than an egg. I mean, you mentioned the rotten tomato, any rotten vegetable probably, because there's a lot more color involved. But the beauty of the egg is that in a very simple way, the same work has been done. That's to say, this boundary has been troubled and people are suddenly alert that there's danger. We're not exactly sure what's coming next, but we know that that fluid, that egg, is where it should not be, and it should be removed quickly. And then we need a community to interpret what happened and to explain why it's unlikely to happen again, so people can go on living their lives confidently, securely.
Yes, and it even makes its way into the language. I don't know how much people use this idiom anymore, but there's the idea of to have egg on one's face is to have experienced a shaming and an embarrassment. So I guess my last question, or my last statement that I'll have you respond to, because I know it's there in your work and in your thinking, is perhaps the only defense is laughter, right? I mean, because the other target of the egg is self-seriousness. The other target of the egg is, in fact, the person who holds himself or herself into high esteem. The person who can laugh at something as absurd as an egging is almost impervious to the egging?
Yes. So the person who is egged suddenly has power. Everyone will watch to see how she or he responds. And if the person brushes it off with laughter, then the audience, the onlookers, everyone on the internet or TV or Instagram sighs relief, because this molehill will not become a mountain. Some people, particularly in the heat of the moment, lack a sense of humor, and that's pretty understandable in my view. And they will become enraged, and they will escalate the situation. And that's something that I think everybody's aware of as well. Particularly now in America with all of the gun violence, we know that for reasons that will afterwards strike us as pretty minor, people can become enraged and they can become violent. And so that's, again, part of the messiness here. We don't know how the victim, if you will respond to the egg, whether the victim will try to downplay it or make this the focus of some sort of attack. So there is dramatic tension there. And the sort of usefulness of the religion is that it can explain what happened and can remind everyone that this is not to happen and it should not happen again, and put them at ease.
All right, but you can't get the egg contents back into the egg. It's something.
No, you can't do that.
It's like the toothpaste
No.
in the tube and the Humpty.
Exactly.
Humpty
You
in the
can send the
Dumpty.
tux to the cleaners, but you can't get the egg back in the egg. No.
And on that lofty thought, we have to say goodbye to our audience today, but it's been great to end with one of our favorite philosophers, John Portman. You might enjoy his book, When Bad Things Happen to Other People. We're going to say farewell, but thank you very much for listening, and may your day be either scrambled or over easy.